That's right, we're drinking the Kool-Aid, and we're looking at movies about cults on today's Horror Movie Syllabus. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. I'm Professor Victor, your guide through the essential, noteworthy, must-see, and best modern horror films. If you're new, check out the intro video that explains what the Horror Movie Syllabus is all about. I'll leave a description in the link below. But today, we're talking about the cult subgenre of horror. And as we usually do here at the Horror Movie Syllabus, we're going to present 3 exemplary examples of that subgenre. Now, if you've seen our videos about religious horror films and possession horror films, you know that we've tread a lot of ground when it comes to religious or faith-based horror movies, and you also know that I tend to like them quite a bit. That's a little bit of an explanation to why the Horror Movie Syllabus also has a cult subgenre that could have just as easily been folded into religion. That said, I do think that cults deserve their own subgenre because, let's face it, the movies tend to be a little bit different from the religious horror films and much different from the possession horror films. Part of that comes from the definition of cult itself, which, when I did a little bit of research on the matter, shows that there's really not a really good consensus of what exactly constitutes a cult. There's a lot of academic discourse about whether or not cult is a pejorative term outright, or if that's something that gets used as a pejorative term by mainstream society or mainstream religions. It's all fascinating stuff, but we're going to sidestep most of that here because when it comes to horror movies, cults are always bad. Always. If there's a cult in a horror movie, they're bad. Period. So there doesn't need to be much debate on the issue. Cults are bad, and if there's something going on with a cult in a horror movie, it's not going to end well. And that is part of what fed my desire to make these separate subgenre for cults, because the expectation when you're watching cult movies is that there's going to be something that happens, some sort of turn of events. There is a group that seems perfectly normal, or maybe not normal, but harmless, and you know that that's not going to be the case ultimately. Like possession movies, there tends to be a bit of a formula for that, and I think the formula feeds on a lot of dread rather than gruesome scares, at least until the third act most of the time, and that's going to be the case in the movies that we were talking about today. Now, as a result, the movies that we're talking about today are categorized like we usually do at the Horror Movie Syllabus as undergraduate, graduate, and postgraduate, with, in this case, undergraduate being the least disturbing and postgraduate being the most disturbing movie. So with that background given, let's go ahead and jump right into the movies. First movie on our list, the undergraduate selection for the cult subgenre, is The Wicker Man. Now, The Wicker Man came out in 1973, and it's something of a legendary horror film, but many people who have seen it will tell you that calling it a horror film in and of itself is a little bit shaky. The movie operates mostly as a mystery. It's a really creepy mystery about a Christian cop who goes to a remote island full of pagans in search of a missing girl. To say anything more than that would give away too much of the mystery, and that's a little bit of the problem, because in this day and age, there's a good chance that the ending of this movie's already been spoiled for you, either through clips on the internet or people talking about it on the internet, or even from the trailer itself, which shows scenes from the end. And that's a shame, because the ending is the best part of the movie. If by some miracle you haven't had it spoiled for you, I certainly won't do that here, but the movie is a very slow build-up to some sort of revelation that doesn't happen until the end of the film, and that revelation is suitably shocking. It's something that audiences in the 70s found to be deeply disturbing, and while I'm not so sure you'd find it that disturbing by today's modern sensibilities, you could at least appreciate for the time how unsettling and creepy it was. But if you see it coming, I think it probably loses a lot of its impact. I feel like you'll be watching the movie just waiting to get to that reveal, and you'll be surprised that the movie kind of just ends as soon as that reveal comes. As a result, I think a lot of the people that watch The Wicker Man now don't find it to be scary at all and quibble about it being called a horror film. YouTuber Ryan Hollinger actually has a whole video about whether or not The Wicker Man truly is scary. It's a really good watch, and I'll link to it in the description below. But again, if you haven't seen the movie and it hasn't been spoiled for you, you might not want to watch his video till you've seen it, because he does go into spoilers. Now, I fall in the camp of the movie being a horror film and actually having some scares. I do think that the movie's a mood piece. It really is about the unsettling nature of the cops' investigation on this island and knowing that something not quite right is going on, but not knowing what it is, that feeling of being the only person in the room who doesn't know what's going on. That is a sense of anxiety or dread that I think comes through really well in the movie. But on the other hand, if you're looking for gore, jump scares, or kind of the more obvious horror tropes, you're not going to get them here. And it's something you should be aware about before you go ahead and check out the movie. Now, there was a sequel that was done for the movie that was done a couple years ago that I haven't seen yet. By all accounts, it's not particularly good. Even the director of the movie, who was the director of the original, says that the original is far superior. And the connection between the two is kind of tenuous. Christopher Lee, the legendary actor Christopher Lee, is in both films, but it's not even clear if he's playing the same character in both movies. So whether or not you think it's an essential movie is up for debate as a sequel. I kind of don't think it really is necessary, but I probably check that out before I actually make that determination. There is also a infamous remake starring Nicolas Cage, and I'm not going to talk about it too much here because there's a pretty good chance that we're going to talk about that in the horror movie syllabus in a different subgenre. So I won't say too much other than to say it is unintentionally hilarious and well worth its own watch. So be aware of the remake. You might find that to be far more entertaining than the original. The next movie we're going to talk about is our graduate level selection, The Invitation. Ooh boy, The Invitation. You know, I ranked these movies in order of most disturbing, and The Invitation was what I had for postgraduate for most of the time before we made this video. And I just at the last minute changed my mind on it, but it really is pretty disturbing. Brief synopsis of the film. A man goes to a dinner party being thrown by his ex-wife after they've split up over a family tragedy, and the dinner party gets really awkward. As usual, I'm not going to spoil anything more than that because this movie goes places that maybe you kind of expect, but you're still shocked when it does. Ah, I saw this movie when I was visiting my in-laws for the holidays. My in-laws live in a different time zone than me, so I'm a couple hours earlier when I'm at their house. And I already go to bed pretty late, so I stay up ridiculously late when I'm at their house. I'm usually up till like 4 in the morning. And what I'll do since everybody else has gone to bed is I'll put on the headphones and I'll watch Netflix or something like that. And that's what I did when I watched The Invitation. It was on Netflix. I had heard vaguely about it being a pretty good movie, but I was unprepared for just how good this movie actually is. It's directed by Karen Kusama, who's done a few other excellent movies, and she is at the top of her game here. The movie is an incredibly well layered film because there's layers of drama in the movie that in and of itself would be a compelling movie. You could toss the horror angle out of this movie. You could toss the cult aspect of this movie out the window and have a really compelling drama with superb acting in it. But the fact that the movie goes so dark and so off the rails is just kind of icing on the cake. It really is a profoundly disturbing film, and I absolutely loved it. Now, much in the same way that we were talking about The Wicker Man, some people, modern audiences in particular, might find this one to be a little bit slow because if you're waiting for the good stuff to kick in, the horrific stuff, it's going to be a little while because it lets it build up. It lets that anxiety and dread build up. You know something's coming. You know that things are going to go badly. You just don't know when and you don't know how bad it's going to be. And I love that. I love that simmer that it keeps the audience on. I like that I'm just kind of on edge the entire time until things finally kick in. And if you're that kind of person that likes that kind of slow build, this movie's going to hit for you. It really is something I can't recommend enough. I love the movie. And by all means, if you haven't seen it, see it. Let us know in the comments what you think. I highly, highly recommend. And the last movie we're going to talk about in the cult subgenre, the postgraduate selection, is The Sacrament. Now, I just mentioned that The Invitation almost got picked as the postgraduate level selection because of just how good and how disturbing it was. So you have to realize that The Sacrament is even more disturbing than that. And the reason why is, in all honesty, they're kind of on par with each other in terms of what you'll see visually on the screen. The difference, the deciding factor for me, is that while both films are really disturbing, The Sacrament's based on an actual event that happened in the 1970s called the Jonestown Massacre. If you're not familiar with it, I'll let you go into Wikipedia and check out the details. But in short, a religious cult decided to commit suicide by drinking poison Kool-Aid. It's really, really upsetting, and The Sacrament leverages your knowledge of that incident in a way that makes it extremely effective and extremely disturbing. The movie is directed by Ty West, who I absolutely love. You might have seen me discuss him in the Halloween recommendations video, and I'll be discussing him other times at the Horror Movie Syllabus. He does a great job here. The movie's set up as found footage. It's a mockumentary about some people that are going to a religious compound where one of the guy's sisters has taken up residence. She's invited them to come in and interview their religious leader, and it is unnerving. At first, everything seems fine, and then you meet the leader. He's very charismatic, and you just know that things aren't going to end well. You'll pick up on the Jonestown similarities pretty quickly, and if you know the story of Jonestown, you know that it doesn't end well. Again, it's a matter of when is it going to go wrong, and how badly is it going to go wrong. And that's the one thing about this movie that was kind of the gut punch for me. Jonestown was awful in real life, and this movie doesn't just do Jonestown, it takes it a few steps further. The imagery in this movie is downright chilling and really upsetting. If you're a more sensitive viewer, this is going to be a tough watch for you, so be forewarned, trigger warning and all that. But the movie is just, it goes there. It doesn't pull punches at all. And I love it for that. It's hard to shock me or surprise me. I watch a lot of horror films, but this one really did kind of slap me in the face a bit. And I loved it for it. I really liked the fact that it didn't hold it back. It didn't try to sugarcoat or lessen the blow of just how dark this kind of situation can be. And while it exaggerates the Jonestown massacre, and it never purports to actually be Jonestown, it's just very clearly heavily influenced by Jonestown. It does give you a sense of just how tragic that incident was by being even more tragic and even more over the top. So it's a really, really profoundly affecting and profoundly effective horror film. Okay, so that's our 3 selections for the cult subgenre of horror. But as usual, I'm going to give you a few extra credit films if you'd like to check out more about this subgenre. Now, the first selection is one that I actually haven't seen yet, but I'm really excited to watch. It's called The Apostle, and it's about a man who is looking for his sister, I think, who's caught up in a cult. Again, I haven't seen it yet, but by all accounts, the movie is absolutely amazing. So much so that I'm kind of curious if it's going to actually force its way onto the horror movie syllabus. If I'm going to have to maybe do a redo of the cult subgenre, or even kind of squeeze it in and shoehorn it somewhere else on the syllabus. So I'm really curious to see what I think of it. I'm really curious to check it out, but I haven't gotten to it yet. If you have seen it, let me know what I'm in for in the comments below. I'd like to hear your opinion. The second movie I'm going to mention is the movie Red State, which is a Kevin Smith film, surprisingly enough. And if you're a fan of Kevin Smith, and I actually am a fan of Kevin Smith, this movie's not like his other movies at all, in a really good way. I know it's going to kind of sound like I'm criticizing Kevin Smith a bit, but I feel like this movie was a step in a mature direction for him. I don't know that he completely successfully becomes a mature filmmaker in this movie, but he shows that he can do something other than the silly dialogue-driven comedies that he does, which again, I do enjoy those, but I do think Smith has a potential to be a really good horror director if you just commit to it and be serious about it. So I would like to see him do more like this. He has done other horror films with middling results. We might be talking about those in some other horror movie syllabus videos. But this one, which is a standoff between a religious cult and the U.S. government, kind of echoes the Branch Davidian Waco fiasco. So This one is another one kind of like the Sacrament that maybe hits a little bit home. Doesn't quite have the punch of the Sacrament, but definitely is one that's worth checking out. And the last movie I'm going to mention for extra credit is Martha Marcy May Marlene, which took me forever to be able to say without screwing it up. It is a drama, really, more than a horror film, if I'm being honest with you. But the cult aspects in the movie and the sense of dread in that are enough to me to go ahead and recommend it here because it's excellent. It's an incredibly good movie with fantastic performances, specifically from Elizabeth Olsen and Sarah Paulson. Sarah Paulson, who I'm not really a fan of, but who is always good. I don't know why I don't really get into her, because she is always good. And Elizabeth Olsen carries this movie. She is brilliant as a woman who has escaped a cult, but hasn't really escaped the psychological impact of that cult. It's fantastic. It has just enough unsettling aspects to squeak into the horror movie syllabus as a extra credit recommendation. And the only reason why it's not actually making the syllabus is because it's probably not really horror. But it's so good, guys. It's something that you should check out. If you haven't checked it out before, check it out. And it's just very somber, and it is slow paced, but again, it's got enough dread, enough heart-wrenching drama, enough creepiness of the cult to really be a really compelling watch. So highest of recommends for that one. Definitely check it out. Let us know what you thought of it. So that's going to do it for today's video. As always, I invite you to leave some comments down below about other movies that you think should have been discussed in this video, or other cult movies that you think might wind up in other subgenres in the horror movie syllabus. I'd be curious to see what your thoughts are on that. With that, thank you very much for your attendance, and class dismissed.